Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Muhammad Laik Siddiqui, the father of Holoface. We begin with what episode 14 has already certified, and we do not move 1 millimeter beyond it. We have sworn an extraction oath. We either compile structure from comparisons, or we refuse with an audit trail. We have frozen public meaning. Only differences in phi are speakable, never an absolute phi. We have banned geometry at the door. No hidden coordinates, no distance smuggling, no background container. We have built the passport. No passport, no claim. And we have paid the first price of legibility, coherence. Gamma must be above the minimum threshold, otherwise we may log data, but we cannot certify structure. Now we arrive at part 11. And part 11 is where many brilliant people with clean intentions accidentally manufacture fantasies. Because here is the trap. Even if your window is licensed, even if your passport is complete, even if your data is coherent enough to see something real, you can still try to pull too much out of what you have. You can still try to read the whole book from a torn sentence. You can still try to extract 100 details from 10 clues. And the tragedy is, the math will still give you answers. It will give you numbers. It will give you curves. It will give you parameters with decimal points. It will give you confidence intervals that look respectable. But those answers can be nothing more than your own imagination wearing the mask of calculation. This is why Part 11 exists. Part 11 installs the identifiability gate. And we will say it in the simplest way possible, because it is one of the most important disciplines in the entire compiler. If the data cannot identify it, the claim is undefined. Not wrong, undefined. Not false. Not even unproven. Undefined, like asking for the color of a sound. Undefined, like asking for the exact name of a stranger you only saw as a blur. Undefined, like demanding the brand of flour in a loaf of bread you tasted once. That is identifiability. Now let's build it together, slowly, in everyday language, but with full scientific spine. Imagine we are standing outside at night. We see a distant house on a hill. A window is glowing. We can tell someone is inside. We can tell the light is on. But can we tell what they are doing? Can we tell whether they are reading, cooking, or sewing? Maybe. Can we tell what page number they are reading? Can we tell what spice they just added? Can we tell the exact sentence they are thinking? No. The light is real. The observation is real. The coherence could even be high. We clearly see the window glowing. But the question we are asking is too detailed for the kind of data we have. That is identifiability. Identifiability is not about whether reality has an answer. Reality always has an answer. Identifiability is about whether our windowed comparisons with our instruments can uniquely and stably pick that answer out from all the other possibilities that would look exactly the same through our window. That is the whole thing. And because episode 14 is a compiler, not a storyteller, we are not allowed to pretend. If many different hidden situations produce the same public comparator data, then the hidden situation is not publicly extractable. It is not licensed. It is not speakable. It is undefined in the language of public science. Now let's make that visceral with a few analogies across scales. At the smallest scale, imagine a doctor listening to your heart with a stethoscope. They hear a rhythm. They hear a murmur. They can say something public. There is a murmur. But can they identify the exact microscopic shape of a valve leaflet? Not from that sound alone. Many different tiny shapes can produce a similar murmur. So the microscopic shape is unidentifiable in that window. If a doctor pretends they can identify it anyway, They are not necessarily lying, they may be guessing. But in our system, guessing is not certified structure. Guessing is refused. Now zoom to a human scale. Imagine you taste a curry. It is rich, it has layers, it has depth. You can confidently identify cumin. You can identify turmeric. You can identify heat. You can identify salt. But can you identify whether the cook toasted the spices for 45 seconds or 60 seconds? Can you identify the exact brand of ghee? Can you identify whether the onions were cooked for 12 minutes or 15? No, not from one taste. Too many different cooking paths land you in a very similar taste. So those details are unidentifiable from that data. And if someone writes a cookbook claiming they extracted all that detail from one taste, the cookbook might be beautiful, but it is not science. It is narrative. Now zoom to a cosmic scale. We observe a pattern in the sky, a certain distribution of light, a certain redshift curve, a certain lensing map. Can we identify the exact microstructure of whatever makes that pattern? Often, no. Many different micromodels can fit the same public pattern within uncertainty. So the microstructure is unidentifiable in that window. This is not an insult to cosmology. It is honesty. It says, within this passport, we can certify these invariants. Beyond that, we mark undefined. Now zoom to the scale of mind. We record EEG or fMRI, and we see a pattern that correlates with a reported experience. Can we identify the unique neural mechanism from that alone? Often, no. Many different neural circuits can generate similar coarse measurements. So we can certify correlations within that measurement window, but we cannot certify a unique mechanism unless the data actually identifies it. That's identifiability again. Same discipline, different domain. Now, because we are building a compiler, we need a crisp operational form. So let's say what identifiability means in the language of this episode. We start with raw input, a comparator graph. That means we have events and edges between events that store comparison outcomes, meaning differences in phi, not absolute phi. We are always inside a licensed finite window W with a passport. We already have coherence gamma of that window, and gamma must be above the minimum threshold, otherwise we are not even allowed to try. Now, within that coherent licensed window, we attempt to extract structure. But extract structure usually means we choose a model family for the structure we are trying to represent inside the window, and we try to infer its parameters from the comparator data. This is where identifiability lives. The question is, do different parameter choices produce measurably different comparator statistics in this window, under this passport, above this uncertainty? If yes, then those parameters are identifiable. If no, then those parameters are not identifiable. And if they are not identifiable, then any claim about their value is undefined. Now, the strongest version of this is simple. If changing a parameter does not change what we can measure, then there is no way to measure it. That parameter is invisible to the window. Invisible parameters are not wrong. They are undefined. That sentence is the heart. Now, the place where we merge the technical rigor from the more formal version without losing the listener is here. Because in technical language, identifiability is detected by information. Information is just a way of saying how sensitive is what we can observe to changes in what we claim. If small changes in the parameter cause clear changes in the observable patterns, then the data contains information about that parameter. If the observable patterns barely change or do not change at all, then the data does not contain information about that parameter. That is what Fisher information measures. We don't need to worship the name, but we do need the discipline. So here is the spoken form we will use. Fisher information is the sensitivity ledger. It tells us which directions in parameter space the data can actually fill. If the ledger says no sensitivity here, then the parameter is unidentifiable. And in our compiler, unidentifiable means undefined. Now we go one step deeper, still in everyday language. Most people think uncertainty is only about noise. They think, if we had less noise, we would know. Sometimes that is true, but identifiability is deeper. You can have very low noise and still not know, because the question itself is not answerable from the type of measurement you're making. It's like having a perfect microphone but listening through a concrete wall. The microphone is excellent, noise is low. Coherence might even be decent for detecting that someone is speaking, but the wall destroys the details. So you can identify speech exists, but you cannot identify the exact sentence. That's identifiability distinct from coherence. Coherence asks, do we hear anything stable at all? Identifiability asks, even if we hear something stable, can we uniquely determine the details we are claiming? Now, let's anchor this to the JET language of episode 14, because this episode ultimately compiles JETs, local derivative structure up to some finite order. And the most common hallucination in advanced science is what we call imaginary jets. That is when someone claims a high-order jet, like third, fourth, 10th order structure, from data that only supports a first or second order reading. It's like fitting a 10th degree curve through a handful of points and calling the wiggles real structure. The wiggles are not necessarily lies, they are just not identified. And here is the brutal beauty. You can always fit. You can always build a curve that hugs your points. But if your curve changes wildly when you remove one point, or when you slightly perturb the data, then that curve is not identified by the data. It is chosen by your method. In episode 14, anything that depends on your method choices rather than invariance of the data is non-public and must be rejected. So identifiability is one of our main anti-hallucination gates. Now let's say the core claim of Part 11 in one clean sentence, as our excerpt would say it. Part 11 certifies this. A structure claim is licensed only if the windowed comparator data identifies it, meaning the claim's parameter content is supported by the information rank and conditioning of the window. Otherwise, the claim is declared undefined and removed from the certified set. Now let's unpack that in audio language. Information rank means how many independent knobs does the data actually constrain? If you claim 20 knobs, but the data only constrains 5, then 50 knobs are imaginary. Conditioning means, even for the knobs the data tries to constrain, is the constraint stable, or is it like balancing on a needle? If it's balancing on a needle, then tiny noise produces huge changes in inferred parameters. That is ill-conditioned. Ill-conditioned claims are not robust. And in episode 14, robust is not a vibe. It is a gate. Now we bring in the rigorous limit that sits underneath, in a way the listener can hold. There is a bound in statistics called the Kamer-Rao bound. We will not say it like a spell. We will translate it. The translation is, even in the best case, the data sets a minimum blur on your parameter estimate. No clever method can beat that blur. If the minimum blur is huge, then your precise estimate is fake. If the minimum blur is infinite, then the parameter is unidentifiable and any estimate is meaningless. That is the whole point. And this is how we merge the two versions. We keep the story spine and we keep this hard floor. Now we must enforce gates. So let's state the identifiability gate in simple words. Gate. Identifiability. Question. Does this window, with this passport, contain enough independent information to support the number and order of claims we are making? Test. We compute an identifiability spectrum, basically a list of how constrained are the different directions of the model. If some directions are near zero constraint, those directions are unidentifiable. We then do the honest thing. We either reduce the claim to only the identifiable part, or we mark the unidentifiable parts as undefined and refuse certification. We do not pretend. We do not keep the number because it looks nice. We do not keep the parameter because the model wants it. We only keep what the data can actually identify. Now, let's make this emotionally real with examples across scales, but always staying inside episode 14's firewall. We will not talk about dynamics or what happens. We will talk about extractability. Example 1. The blurry photograph. Imagine you have a photo of a person taken from far away, at night, with a shaky camera. You can identify there is a human figure. You can identify they are wearing something light on top, darker on bottom. Maybe you can identify they are tall or short relative to the door behind them. But can you identify eye color? Can you identify the exact pattern of freckles? Can you identify the brand of shoes? No. If you estimate the eye color anyway, you did not extract it. You invented it. So in our ledger, the claim eye color equals green is not false. It is undefined because the data cannot identify it. Example 2. The microscope limit. Suppose you use a light microscope and you claim to see structures smaller than the diffraction limit. You might draw them. You might label them. You might feel confident. But the instrument's window does not contain that information. So the claim is undefined. Now, you could change the passport, use a different instrument, use a different window. Then maybe it becomes identifiable. That's how science progresses, by changing windows to gain identifiability. But inside the given window, you do not pretend. Example 3. Social science. You survey 50 people and ask them a deep question, and you build a model with 20 hidden traits. The math will fit something. But does the data identify 20 traits? Usually not. Many different trait configurations produce similar survey answers, so the extra traits are undefined. You can keep the data, you can log hypotheses, but you cannot certify those traits as public structure. Example 4. Astrophysics. You measure a galaxy rotation curve and you want to infer the full three-dimensional distribution of unseen mass. The rotation curve is one-dimensional information. Many different three-dimensional distributions can produce the same one-dimensional curve. So the detailed distribution is not uniquely identified by that window. You may certify a family of compatible structures, and you may certify invariants that survive across that family. But you cannot certify one unique microprofile unless your data truly identifies it. Example 5. Brain signals. You record EEG and you claim to identify the precise deep source location inside the brain. But EEG is smeared by the skull and scalp. Many internal source configurations can lead to similar skull patterns. So the precise deep source is often not identifiable from EEG alone. That does not mean EEG is useless. It means certify what it can identify: surface patterns, band power differences, certain robust contrasts, and mark the rest as undefined. Now we must bring it back to the compiler pipeline line, because every part must include it somewhere. So listen carefully, because this is the toolchain spoken as one line. Licensed window, then passport with coherence and identifiability, then nmax and uncertainty, then local lift, cuts if needed, excisions, certified domain D, then A equals D phi tilde, then finite jets up to nmax, then invariance collapse, then topology and defects, then invariant bases, then stability and entities, then scale stratification, then escape test, then handoff. Identifiability sits early, right after coherence, because it decides what complexity is even legally readable. Now we need the prediction without dynamics. Prediction in this episode means what failure signature must appear if the discipline is real. Here is the prediction of part 11. As we attempt higher and higher jet order without increasing the window's information content, identifiability must fail in diagnosable ways. Rank deficiency, near zero spectral modes, exploding best possible uncertainty floors, unstable parameter estimates that flip under small perturbations, and dependence on arbitrary modeling choices. That is what must happen. And if it does not happen, if someone can repeatedly recover high-order jets from windows whose identifiability measures prove they cannot support them, then our gate is wrong. That is our falsifier. Now let's state that falsifier in one clean audio sentence. If stable high-order jet structure can be certified across replications in windows whose identifiability spectrum shows insufficient rank and conditioning for that order, then the identifiability gate is falsified. Now we must include a mandatory stress test, at least one explicit one. So here is our stress test for identifiability. We do a small perturbation test. We take the same comparator data and we create tiny lawful variations, slightly different sampling stencils of the same class, slightly different legitimate preprocessing choices, slightly different random subsets consistent with the passport. If the claim parameters swing widely, then they are not identified. If the claim remains stable within priced uncertainty, then it is identified. That test is mandatory. Another stress test is parameter trade. We check whether two parameters can trade off with each other while producing the same observable comparisons. If yes, then the individual parameters are not identified, only the combination is. So we certify only the combination, not the individuals. This is how we remain honest. Now, we must give the carry line. Here is the carry line of part 11. If the data can't identify it, the claim is undefined. Say it again, because it is the anti-myth engine. If the data can't identify it, the claim is undefined. Now, we must make the audit artifact explicit, because this is where the program becomes uncheatable. At the end of every extraction attempt involving parameter content or jet order claims, the ledger must record an identifiability report, and we will say what it contains in simple language. The identifiability report contains the passport ID for the window, the coherence gamma report, the model family tag, meaning what class of structure we attempted to infer, the identifiability spectrum, a ranked list of how many independent directions the data constrains and how strongly, a conditioning flag, whether the inference is stable or needle balanced, a best possible uncertainty floor warning, the minimum blur implied by the data so nobody can pretend, a declared maximum supported jet order Nmax for that window under that sampling class, a list of which parts are certified, which parts are partially identified, and which parts are undefined. And finally, a pass or refusal certificate with reasons. Now the last requirement, revocation clause. So we must state it clearly. Revocation clause. If any certified output contains jet claims or parameter claims beyond what the identifiability spectrum supports for that window and passport, those claims are revoked immediately, marked undefined, removed from the certified set, and logged to the negative archive with the identifiability failure classification. No exceptions. Because without this clause, science becomes a talent show. And episode 14 is not a talent show. It is a compiler. Now, let's make this part feel like a lived discipline, not just a gate. We are going to speak directly to the listener, because the listener will meet this mistake everywhere. They will meet it in health claims, they will meet it in economics, they will meet it in AI, they will meet it in physics, even in prestigious places. The mistake looks like this. Someone fits a big model. They get a crisp number. They speak with authority. But they never ask the identifiability question. Could the data even have told us that? Did the window have jurisdiction for that detail? Or did the model simply choose a value because it had to choose something? This is why Part 11 is not extra math. Part 11 is moral hygiene for public knowledge. Because when we call something public, we are claiming others can check it. And if others cannot check it, then it was never public in the first place. Now we will close by tying Part 11 back to the triunity requirement in the only way we are allowed to. We are not allowed to smuggle time, space, motion as primitives. But every certified structure has three readouts: omega, kappa, nu. So here is how identifiability touches triunity. If your window cannot identify a certain structure, then it cannot identify any of its readouts either. You may see hints of cadence, omega, but not texture, kappa. You may see texture, kappa, but not drift, nu. Or you may identify only a combined invariant that can be read in multiple ways. Identifiability is what prevents us from pretending one readout is the true one. We certify only what is identified, then later episodes can interpret. That keeps the firewall clean. And now we can state the final woven conclusion of Part 11, in the most human language possible. We are building a public science that does not confuse a good fit with a real extraction. We are building a discipline where the data is allowed to say, I cannot answer that. And when the data cannot answer, we do not fill the silence with stories. We write undefined and we move on. And that is not weakness. That is the strongest kind of honesty, because it creates a map of where knowledge is possible and where it is not yet possible. And that map is the most precious thing a civilization can build. So we seal Part 11 with its carry, its audit, and its revocation. Carry. If the data can't identify it, the claim is undefined. Audit artifact. An identifiability report with spectrum, rank, conditioning, best possible uncertainty floor, declared NMAX, certified versus undefined partitions, and a pass or refusal certificate tied to the passport. Revocation clause. Any jet or parameter claim beyond identifiability is revoked, marked undefined, and removed from the certified set. Part 11 complete. We have now installed the identifiability gate. We have made it impossible inside the compiler to sell imagination as structure. And with that gate locked, we are ready for the next cruelty that saves science from myth. The operational ceiling, NMAX, where we do not merely ask what is identifiable in principle, but what is legally readable in practice inside finite windows. But for now, we hold the line. We do not overread. We do not hallucinate. We do not pretend. We certify only what the window can identify, and we refuse the rest with receipts. Always, peace be upon you.